Good afternoon, all of you. My second lecture on Christopher Boone and our connect with him. Okay, so I call this lecture Neurotypicality, yet another catchment area of the bestseller. Oh, yeah, um, Curious. I'm going to call this book Curious hereafter. Curious is a bestseller. How much? It's sold 12 million copies and translated to 36 languages. That's monumental. Um, what henceforth, what I'm not really going to say, well, all these 12 million people and beyond, or ableistic, they are negative in mindset and all that. That's not at all true. But as I said in the previous lecture, we are going to analyze some of the building blocks of this catchment area of the bestseller. Okay, so what is neurotypicality? You know, I would refer you to this wonderful book. The book is called Divergent Mind, Thriving in a World That Wasn't Designed for You by Jenara Nirenberg. Jenara, Jenara, Nirenberg. I found this book fantastic for many reasons. One, it gives so much energy and empowerment to people who read it, particularly women. And second, it's a great read. I mean, I picked up the book, ebook, and couldn't stop. I just read 3-4 chapters without a pause, you know. So many concepts about neurotypicality I'm going to borrow from this book. Okay, before we get into neurotypicality, we like to ask why that concept at all. Well, you know, if anything is true about human condition, one is vulnerability and second, diversity. These are the only two factors that appear universal. So far, in our course and beyond, many identity-based studies and so on, we understand diversity. You know, but those diversities are based on external markers. Maybe my physical disability, race, and some are cultural, such as caste and so on. But there are many invisible diversities. Maybe one of you is sensitive, one of you is emotionally diverse. You can switch over to emotions, many emotions, very quickly. One of you is acutely empathetic. Maybe one of you is very, very focused. One of you is quickly irritated. One of you is good at math, and one of you may be good at, fiction or painting. So it looks like our brains. I'm not too happy to say hardwired, but I'm definitely ready to say that we host inner worlds, or our interiorities are very, very diverse. And understanding them is a great task and is actually becoming understanding that diversity of the inner worlds is becoming this becoming a very important discourse these days, thanks to grassroots activism, literary activism, parental activism, and so on. So that activism you can call as neurodiversity. Why neuro? Well, acknowledging that our biologies are brute facts. On top of that, the way our brute and crude biologies interact with our social systems is also equally important. Remember the medical model of disability? Two views broadly about medical model. One is that, well, hey, your condition, blind, 5-letter word, and that's it. That's one view. The other view is innumerable ideologies that work around that condition. You see? So both encompass, can be, both can be accommodated into the medical model. Here, when people say neurodiversity, they have, different makeups of the mind in place, and that different makeups have to be recognized as diversity rather than calling something, normal or abnormal. As simple as that. Silberman, Silberman book, Neurotype, is very good. I also refer you to that. It's very good to understand this phenomenon. This neurodiversity, the way we recognize diversity of the inner worlds, is also gender specific. You would readily notice how our notion of motherhood and fatherhood, for example, is wired in our society. Father is strict and disciplined, or strict disciplinarian, and mom is a provider, and she's accommodative, emotionally diverse and sensitive, and so on. So this kind of hard-found notions, they also involve this neurodiversity phenomenon. However, it's important to understand that neurodiversity, is an activist framework, and it is all about the variegatedness or diversity of the inner worlds. What kind of inner world diversity we are talking about? Because neurodiversity as a movement, as an activism, as a framework of reference, as a gestalt, it is not shy of the brute fact of biology. Some labels do rounds in the neurodiversity movement. For example, Genera talks about HSP, highly sensitive person, ADHD, hyperdensity, ADHD, attention deficit hyperactive disorder, autism or Asperger's, and synesthesia, and so on. Well, explain briefly. It's not important that we dwell on these labels extensively, but for a quick reference, highly sensitive person, HSP, in 1980s, Elaine Ron came up with this beautiful book, HSP, Highly Sensitive Person. Thousands, literally thousands of women suddenly felt, okay, I'm always called sensitive, emotionally reactive. Maybe I'm called weak. Oh, the notorious weaker sex nonsense. So suddenly many women felt this book exactly describes their condition, cultural condition, social condition, intimate condition, call it whatever you want. The thing is, all of us have a different temperament. Some are highly sensitive, maybe sensitive to light, sensitive to noise around, maybe sensitive to, you know, rough environments socially, sensitive to violence, ADHD, well, attention deficit hyperactive. People who have or who identify with this label, they or sort of find it difficult to concentrate. They feel fidgety. Maybe they feel fluctuating frequently. Autism or Asperger's. Among other stereotypes, autism and Asperger's is about communication and social, conformity problem. And synesthesia, well, one sense, touch, for example, sense getting activated for sense connected to seeing. For example, a certain kind of food invoking intense visual images. Some synesthetes, they have, they are very sensitive to pain of other. For example, if somebody's cut their hand with blade by accident, immediately a synesthete would feel the pain in her hand. And this is true. This can happen. Oh, Haim, are you trying to put people into baskets of labels? No. It is about recognizing the diversity of human expressions. So, therefore, using these labels beyond biological marker or including the biological marker, neurodiversity folks or activists, keep going to talk about people's sensitivity, people's sense of interiority, people's sense of thought, emotion, reactivity, composure, withdrawal, focusing or not focusing, or just withdrawing into the dark room, whatever, being anxious. People recognize that as diversity of approaches to everyday life, if you like. It's not maybe just identity markers. It is about my everyday life is different. In this ephemeral time, I feel different in different situations. For God's sake, don't suppress me for that. Nothing about us without us. You see, that's the activist approach to neurodiversity. In fact, neurodiversity movement is not just a noisemaker. It's about making business possible, making classrooms possible, making families possible. It is about how to accommodate differences, how to peruse and make advantage human diversity, if you like. So therefore, they take, people like Genera take language seriously and so on. Right. Why do I talk about all these things? Well, when I say neurotypicality, it is about, if in simple words, neurotypicality will involve non-recognition of this diversity of the inner worlds, or the inner worlds that impinge on the external worlds. It's a kind of cerebral parochialism, neurotypicality. What does that mean in practical terms? Saying that you need to have this emotion in this place, you need to have this amount of speech in a given situation, you need to have this amount of rationality to read this particular kind of book, you need to, as a teenager, you must do this and you must not do that. It's about must and must not, do and do not. It's kind of a life led by parochialism, replete with commandments about what to do and what not to do. All right, that's neurotypical. So when I say, when I come up with the topic, neurotypicality, yet another catchment of area of the bestseller, I basically mean how that parochialism, in some sense, harvested, made use of by this book, or how that parochialism is challenged by this book. It's not an attempt to say this book is bakwas. No, not at all. It's about to say how it navigates that space. And therefore, one of the contention is, that's the important reason. Actually, all of us are so emotionally bound by this notion of rationality, notion of how to be and how not to be in a particular situation. Very rigid notion of, many of us are emotionally invested in that rigidity, in that parochialism. And how does this book navigate that neurotypicality? Since it does, it becomes bestseller. That's the central point of this talk. Yes? Let's see how. Okay, to make, give a flavor of this excellent literary masterpiece, I strongly recommend that all of you read the book, and if you are familiar and read the book 100 times, read it once more. It's a beautiful book. Part 2 of my lecture. Now, I mean, mini part. I'm reading the excerpt for you from the book. It starts with page 11. By the way, as I said in the previous talk, the book has 9, 11, 13, 15, 17 odd numbers. Very, very, again, illustrating Christopher's mind. By the way, this fiction, one more reason why it gives it sort of become an authentic autoethnographic voice, how it gains that voice, is that because of this first person narrative, in some way one may mistake this novel to be autobiographical. because that's how it is written. And that's one more reason why you can have some kind of affective witness to a teenager growing up, you see. Okay, let me not talk too much. Let me read the excerpt for you. Shall we? All right, page 11. Then the police arrived. I like the police. They have uniforms and numbers, you know what they are meant to be doing. There was a policewoman and a policeman. The policewoman had a little hole in her tights on her left ankle and a red scratch in the middle of the hole. Look at the details. The policeman had a big orange leaf stuck to the bottom of his shoe, which was poking out from one side. The policewoman put her arms round Mrs. Shears and led her back toward the house. Mrs. Shears is the landlady where, in whose garden Wellington is lying dead. Okay? I lifted my head off the grass. The policeman squatted down beside me and said, "Would you like to tell me what's going on here, young man?" I sat up and said, "The dog is dead." "I got that far," he said. I said, I think someone killed the dog." "How old are you?" he asked. I replied, "I am 15 years, 3 months, and 2 days. Will you say that? I'm asking you. I'm reading his reply, okay? I replied, "I am 15 years, 3 months, and 2 days. And what precisely were you doing in the garden?" he asked. "I was holding the dog," I replied. And why were you holding the dog?" he asked. This was a difficult question. It was something I wanted to do. I like dogs. It made me sad to see that the dog was dead. I like policemen too, and I wanted to answer the question properly, but the policeman did not give me enough time to work out the correct answer. "Why were you holding the dog?" he asked again. "I like dogs," I said. "Did you kill the dog?" he asked. I said, "I did not kill the dog." "Is this your fork?" he asked. He is referring to the garden fork. Okay. I said, "No." "You seem very upset about this," he said. He was asking too many questions and he was asking them too quickly. They were stacking up in my head like loaves in factory where Uncle Terry works. Observe that observation, okay? Like loaves in the factory. The factory is a bakery and he operates the slicing machines. And sometimes a slicer is not working fast enough, but the bread keeps coming and there is a blockage. I sometimes think of my mind as a machine, but not always as a bread slicing machine. It makes it easier to explain to other people what is going on inside it. Okay, I stopped there. What do you think about this excerpt? too many questions upset him. He says, when too many comes, it feels like bread loaves from a machine. It's clogging the way. You know, this novel, in some sense, autoethnographically, through Christopher, walks us through that mind which is different. That mind which can process quickly, very quickly, several million times per second, how many, the picture of someone, policeman's shoes, it's poking out from behind. But it cannot process, words that seem to be coming very quickly. So I said in my previous conversation about his rare mathematical abilities and so on. Anyway, these are very stereotypical of description about Asperger's and autism and so on. And this novel writes itself into that legacy, cultural legacy. There's no doubt. But there's a lot going on. Lots of movies, My Name is Khan, and many other portray Asperger's without empathy and that kind of thing. But, you find Christopher defining empathy differently. In fact, it is the police and other systems around him who do not have empathy, who do not imagine that the police does not understand or is not trained to understand that investigation will involve different minds that react differently. When you keep poking someone very hard, that person gets clogged, and that can happen to all of us. And it can happen to some people more naturally, because their brute fact of biology and their condition, their situation in the society are designed that way. So, one witnesses to such fine excerpts, many parochialisms of that kind, and that's why, that becomes a new catchment area of the bestseller. To elucidate that point, let me borrow from Stanley Fish, who talks about affective poetics. So, the catchment area of this bestseller is kind of made by an interesting combination of affective poetics and neurotypicality. What does Stanley Fish say about Stanley Fish, one of the greatest critics about readers' response, criticism, and so on? Stanley Fish proposes to, relocate meaning in the reader by replacing the illusory objectivity of the text with the experience of a reading subject. A sentence, he claims, is an event, something that happens to with the participation of the reader. And it is this event, this happening, all of it, and not anything that could be said about it or any information one might take away from it. That is, I would argue, the meaning of the sentence. All right, in simple words, what he is saying is the act of reading, or that which goes on in the reader's mind, or reader's affective universe, that is emotions, that decides the density of readership. Oh yeah, we are all invested in one, for example, ableism. I can speak very well, I can think very well, I organize things, my day, my classroom, and all that. In some sense, um, unabashedly, we are all. But the point is, if somebody struggles in that everyday management, like Christopher, then we become curious readers. Some kind of ableism in operation makes that affective poetics, affective bonding with Christopher Boone possible. Second notion, aesthetic nervousness. Oh yeah, I think you heard my conversation with Professor Quason. There is this permanent battle going on in readerly attitude, or if you like, readership, and also in the production and dissemination of literary pieces that involve disabled people or people who think and look differently. And what is that? How to represent them? How much of Christopher's autistic tendency I should show, whether I should shows Christopher's autism and its idiosyncrasies at all, and in what proportion. It all leads to crisis of representation multiply in the text. And that crisis is something, that representational conflicts is something readers take to the book affectively, emotionally, when they witness or take on board people who feel and look differently. Here, in this case, readers' affective bonding with Boone comes from that fact. Okay? The third affective bonding with Boone that made it a bestseller, I would call inner symptoms complex, inner symptom problem. See, you go to a film involving a blind chap, for example, a blind hero. Then you look for his private life or her private life with the way she behaves with people, maybe how she conducts herself with a mobility cane, or how he handles difficult circumstances involving villains and so on. So the blindness of that person, the effect of blindness on his interiority is measured by the symptomatic behaviors that hero comes up with. Again, this book is very good because it walks through the inner life of the teenager who is growing up, who says, "My mind is like a slicer machine." Sometimes when people throw up too many things on me, the sensitive person in me animates and I somehow clog and lie down. I withdraw. I cannot react. Instead of saying, Christopher could not bear police investigation and he fell down. The book, say, walks you through that metaphorical representation about his sensitive inner mind that now feels to that teenager like a slicer machine of Uncle Terry. What more the reader wants as a witness to such an autoethnographic read? It's very beautiful. You have many more anecdotes like this, and I bet you will enjoy. And the next possible thing that makes it a bestseller in that way is the binary view of the mind. Good and bad mind, divine and evil mind, intelligent and foolish mind, clay-headed versus razor-sharp mind. There are many 100 billion binaries like that across cultures, okay? And after all, it is translated in 36 languages. So therefore, the binary complex, structural binaries that we have made about ourselves, our capacities, and our mind should have played into it. I say should have. I haven't tested it. Right. Now, conclusion. Neurodiversity, its terminologies, neurodiversity as a movement, as a grassroots activist framework, as a philosophical, as a cluster of philosophical frameworks, give us an opportunity to understand that neurotypicality can also be an affective bonding principle between readers and the text. And I wanted to try illustrating that through our Connect with Christopher Boone. There are many other ways of doing it. We'll explore it in our own respective ways. Okay? Thank you so much.